Welcome to Fundamental Duties of a Floodplain Administrator, presented by the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, Division of Water. First, we need to ask who administers the local floodplain ordinance. Each community that participates in the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP, has designated someone to fill the role of floodplain administrator. This may be a clerk-treasurer, planner, builder, building inspector, director of plan commission, emergency management director, or even the local dog catcher. We understand that most floodplain administrators in local communities also have other duties. So let's look at the authority to regulate floodplain. Keep in mind that the local administrator is simply enforcing the community's regulations. When looking at the NFIP, the community authority to adopt regulations for reducing flood loss is granted by the state. Inherent in the right to enact those regulations is the duty and authority to administer and enforce them. Now that we have covered who enforces these regulations and where the authority comes from, let's look at the fundamental duties of the floodplain administrator. First, the floodplain administrator needs to become familiar with the flood risk in their community. They should utilize the community's flood maps to recognize areas that may be subject to flood risk, as the high hazard areas are identified on the maps. They should tour the special flood hazard areas in their community to identify existing development. Local administrators may want to make this a routine tour so future development and any violations are more easily identified. You can also compile a list of the structures at risk, if not already complete and up to date in your community. GIS is a really great tool for this task. They need to review and evaluate development permit applications to determine if the proposed development will take place in the special flood hazard area. If it will be in the special flood hazard area, then determine if the site is in the floodway, fringe, or where the limits of the floodway and fringe have not yet been determined. Request a flood FARA or floodplain analysis and regulatory assessment. Every community must have a permit process for development in the special flood hazard area. This may vary from community to community, but they all must include the basic step of checking the floodplain map and answering a few basic questions. Is the proposed site in the special flood hazard area? What is the base flood elevation, also referred to as a regulatory flood or 1% chance flood? Remember to permit all development. So what is development? Development means any man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate, including but not limited to construction, reconstruction, or placement of a structure or any addition to a structure, installing a manufactured home on a site, preparing a site for a manufactured home, or installing a recreational vehicle on a site for more than 180 days, installing utilities, erection of walls and fences, construction of roads and similar projects, construction of flood control structures such as levees, dikes, dams, or other channel improvements, mining, dredging, filling, grading, excavation, or drilling operations, even the storage of material, or any activity that might change the direction, height, or velocity of flood or surface water. Development does not include activities such as the maintenance of existing structures and facilities such as painting, re-roofing, resurfacing roads, or gardening, plowing, and similar agricultural practices that do not involve filling, grading, excavation, or other construction of permanent structures. Keep in mind, when maintenance activities are done concurrently with repairs of damage or other improvements, they are considered part of all the work taking place and must be considered when doing substantial improvement or substantial damage calculations. Here we see a bridge reconstruction over a dry stream bed. This is just a reminder that any development within the floodway requires an authorization or other approval from the Department of Natural Resources prior to issuing a local permit. Interpreting the maps and determining flood zone is only required for permitting purposes. An exception to this is a CRS community who has elected to provide this service to earn points in the CRS program. We'll be providing information regarding the FARA process in the video on the Indiana Floodplain Information Portal. The applicant is responsible for obtaining a BFE or hiring an engineering firm experienced in modeling and reflecting the floodplain limits and BFE information on the subdivision plat in a Zone A or known flood-prone areas for subdivisions or other developments that are 5 acres or more or 50 lots, whichever is more restrictive. Note, in Indiana, DNR will need to review and approve the modeling or BFE that has been developed, provided the upstream drainage area is greater than 1 square mile. For areas that have an upstream drainage area less than 1 square mile, it is up to the local official if they wish to accept the data. You may want to discuss this with the county surveyor or stormwater official in your community. Some permit officials may be limited regarding staff and/or expertise. Plans should include the base flood elevation, ground elevations at the site, proposed lowest floor elevation, number, size, and location of flood vents if applicable. Materials used below the lowest floor must be flood resistant in nature. Here we have a site plan. Note the elevations and the BFE shown. We can see that only a portion of the proposed structure is in the fringe, but it is regulated as the entire structure is in, even when only a portion of the structure is in the special flood hazard area. In this case, we see that the septic is outside of the special flood hazard area, but the well and the gas tank are in. In this case, you would need to ensure that the tank was properly anchored and/or elevated, and the wellhead would need to be extended above the flood protection grade or have a flood-proof cap. Here we see a foundation plan. On the left, a bird's eye view showing the flood vents and details on them, along with the pier and beam placement. On the right, we see a cross-sectional view. From it, we see the important details of the flood opening being within 1 foot of grade, the interior grade being at or above the exterior grade, and the finished floor being at the flood protection grade. The floodplain administrator will need to advise an applicant of other permits or approvals that they may be necessary. Federal permits may be from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. State permits could be from DNR, IDEM, or Indiana Department of Health. Other permits may be from the local drainage board or health department for an on-site sewage disposal system. Water course alterations may be a relocation, flood wall, or any other modification. Generally, these alterations will require a DNR floodway permit without exception. A letter of map revision is required by FEMA for alterations, and a conditional letter of map revision, or CLOMAR, would be required for any alterations that will increase flood elevation. Local ordinances require the upstream and downstream or adjacent communities be contacted prior to and after the alteration, since your community's action may have a direct impact on them. You'll need to be certain any modifications have been approved by DNR or FEMA prior to issuing any local permit. As you continue to perform your duties as a local floodplain administrator, remember, development is not just buildings. You'll need to issue permits when appropriate, conditionally approve as appropriate, and deny permits when necessary. Most permits in the special flood hazard area should be issued conditionally and only granted approval once all documentation is received and it is verified the development meets the standards of the local ordinance. Inspections are an important part of the floodplain administrator's duty. In many communities, the inspections are listed directly in the ordinance and include a site inspection prior to the permit, an inspection prior to the placement of the lowest floor, and a final inspection to verify all other floodplain requirements have been met. You'll want to check the foundation construction, ensure that structures meet the elevation requirements, flood vents or openings are present if required, the use of flood resistant materials below flood protection grade or FPG, and all utilities and service equipment for structures is at or above the flood protection grade. Floodplain administrators must keep accurate records of development in their community in perpetuity. The records will include application or permit records, inspection records to include any post-flood or other disaster damage assessments, compliance records, as-built lowest floor elevation and elevation certificate or floodproofing certificate, the floodplain analysis and regulatory assessment, and any DNR or other agency permits, any variance actions, and finally, any letters of map change. You will need to remedy violations by investigating them and taking the appropriate action. Implement the enforcement procedures in your ordinance, including fines when necessary. Bring structures or other development into compliance with your local ordinance. Protect structures and other development from flood damage. When necessary, you can modify your procedures and training to deter future similar violations. Your other duties consist of advising your elected officials and the public on floodplain management, counseling applicants and your variance board about variance criteria, post-flood and other disaster damage assessments, and notification to DNR and FEMA when there are changes to your community's corporate limits. Seems like we've discussed lots of duties. So now let's look at what's not on the list. This is a short list and only contains flood zone determinations for lenders and insurance agents and providing flood insurance related information to the public. Communities can receive points for CRS for providing information about properties in the special flood hazard to the public, though. We just want to make sure, we just want to see communities make things work. Each community is unique, so the processes will vary from community to community. We want to see that you have a good permit process in place and are permitting all development in the special flood hazard area. For additional assistance, you can review the Floodplain Administrator's Guidebook that is posted on our website, which contain step-by-step procedures for many of the items discussed in this video. We also have the quick guide on the website, which is a great educational tool for both local officials and the public. Thank you for watching Fundamental Duties of a Floodplain Administrator.